The soap smelled like flowers she had never seen. Kaya held it in her palm, turning it slowly, watching how the evening light through the fort window caught the pale yellow surface. It was smooth, almost soft, nothing like the clay and sage root her grandmother used to grind by the river. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, not from fear exactly, from something else, something that felt like the ground disappearing beneath her feet while she was still standing on it. The water in the basin was warm. Steam rose in thin ribbons. She could see her reflection fractured across the surface, dark eyes staring back at her with an expression she did not recognize. Behind her, 6 other women sat on wooden benches, silent, their faces turned downward. No one spoke. No one had spoken since they arrived 3 days ago. Words felt dangerous now, like they might break something that was already cracking. Outside, the sky was turning the color of bruised fruit. Purple and deep orange bleeding together. Kaya remembered that color. It was the same sky the night she left her sons sleeping beside the fire, their small bodies curled against each other like puppies. Her husband had kissed her forehead and told her to walk north with the other women, that the soldiers were coming at dawn, that the men would lead them away from the camp, that she would be safer if she went now, quietly, without looking back. She had looked back anyway. That was 22 days ago, or 23. She had lost count somewhere between the second river crossing and the day it rained so hard that walking felt like drowning while still breathing. A woman in a grey dress stood near the door. Her name was Clara. She had said it twice, slowly, pointing to herself, Clara. She had kind eyes, but Kaya did not trust kind eyes anymore. Kind eyes had watched her people starve. Kind eyes had signed papers that moved entire villages like stones across a game board. Kind eyes had smiled while taking children to schools where they learned to forget their names. Clara stepped forward now, holding a towel folded into a perfect square. She gestured toward the basin, then toward Kaya's hair, the braids. Kaya's fingers moved to touch them instinctively. Her mother had braided this pattern the morning of her wedding, 11 years ago. The leather cord woven through was from her grandmother's dress, passed down through 4 generations. If she undid these braids, if she washed her hair with this flower-scented soap, would her mother still recognize her when they met again in the next world? The other women were watching now, waiting. Kaya could feel their eyes on her back, heavy as stones. She was the oldest among them, 32 winters. The others looked to her for answers she did not have. What do we do? Do we resist? Do we accept? Do we wash away what we are to survive another day? Kaya lowered her hands into the water. It was so warm it almost hurt. Her fingers had been cold for weeks, cracked and bleeding from walking, from climbing, from carrying firewood in the mountains where they had hidden before the soldiers found them. The warmth spread up her wrists into her arms, and for one terrible moment she wanted to cry, not from sadness. From the simple, unbearable relief of warm water touching frozen skin, she lifted the soap to her face and breathed in. Lavender. That was the English word Clara had used, pointing to the purple drawings on the paper wrapper. Lavender. It smelled like something from a dream, something that did not belong in her world of pine smoke and sage and sweat and earth. She pressed it against her cheek. Smooth. Cold despite the warm room. Foreign. Clara was speaking softly now, gesturing again. Kaya understood without understanding. Wash. Be clean. Become acceptable. Become safe. Become something we can allow to exist within these walls. Her oldest son's name was Takoda. He would be 9 winters now, maybe 10, depending on how long she had been walking. He had a scar above his left eyebrow from falling out of a tree when he was 4, trying to catch a bird he swore had spoken to him in his dreams. He laughed like thunder, loud and sudden and impossible to ignore. Her youngest, Hania, was 6, quiet, thoughtful. He collected stones and lined them up by size, by color, by the way light hit them. He had given her his favorite one the night she left, pressing it into her hand and closing her fingers around it. She still had it, hidden in the hem of her dress, sewn in with thread she had pulled from her own sleeve. If she washed this paint from her arms, would Takoda still know her? If she undid these braids, would Hania recognize his mother? Kaya dipped her hands into the water again and began. The paint came off in brown clouds, swirling through the basin like smoke. It had been made from ochre and animal fat, applied by her sister-in-law during the last ceremony before the village scattered. Protection symbols. Lines that connected her to her ancestors, to the spirits of the land, to the women who had walked before her. She watched them dissolve into nothing, into colored water that would be thrown out into the dirt behind the fort and forgotten by morning. One of the younger women behind her made a sound, not quite a cry, something softer, something that lived in the throat and did not make it past the lips. Kaya did not turn around. She could not. If she looked at them now, if she saw their faces, she would stop. And if she stopped, they would all stop. And if they all stopped, Clara would call the soldiers. And if the soldiers came, they would not bring soap and warm water. Her braids came undone slowly. The leather cord stuck, tangled in hair that had not been washed in months. She had to pull hard, feeling strands break, feeling the pattern her mother had created unravel into nothing. When it finally came loose, she held it for a moment, just looking at it. Brown leather, worn smooth, stained with sweat and time and love. She set it on the bench beside her and did not look at it again. The soap made her hair feel strange, slippery, like it did not belong to her anymore. She worked it through slowly, carefully, the way Clara was showing her with gestures and gentle corrections. The water turned darker. Dirt and smoke and days of walking rinsed away into the basin. When she was finished, her hair hung loose and wet down her back, heavier than she remembered, unfamiliar. Clara brought her a dress, cotton, white, simple. It buttoned up the front with small round buttons made of something smooth and pale. Kaya stared at it. She had worn deerskin her entire life. She had worn cloth traded from the missionaries once, a blue shawl, but it had torn within a season, and she had never replaced it. This dress looked like it would tear if she breathed wrong. It looked like something that required a life where nothing dangerous ever happened. She put it on anyway. The fabric felt thin against her skin, like wearing air. It did not move the way deerskin moved. It did not protect. It did not remember. It was just cloth, just threads woven together by hands she would never meet, dyed white by chemicals she could not name, sold in stores she had never entered. She buttoned it slowly, each button a small surrender, each closure a door shutting behind her. When she finally looked up, Clara was smiling. Not a big smile, just a small one, sad around the edges, like she knew what this cost, but was grateful anyway. She handed Kaya a blanket, grey wool, scratchy but warm. Then she pointed toward a room at the end of the hall. Beds, rest, safety. The other women rose and followed. One by one, they washed. One by one, they undid their braids. One by one, they put on the white dresses that made them look like ghosts of themselves. One by one, they walked down the hall toward the room with the beds and closed the door behind them. The room was small. 4 narrow beds with thin mattresses and wool blankets. A single window with bars on it, not because they were prisoners, Clara had explained with gestures and slow words, but because of the cold, because of the wind, because of protection. Kaya did not believe her, but she did not argue. There was no point in arguing about bars when you were already inside the cage. She lay down on the bed closest to the window. The mattress was softer than the ground, but harder than the furs she had slept on her entire life. It smelled like lye and sun and something chemical she could not identify. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and stared at the ceiling. Wood beams, straight, measured, built by hands that believed in right angles and permanence. Outside she could hear voices. Soldiers talking, horses moving. Somewhere far away a dog barked, normal sounds. The sounds of a place where people lived regular lives, where they woke up and ate breakfast and did their work and went to sleep without wondering if tomorrow they would still have a home. Beside her, one of the younger women was crying, silently, just tears running down her face into the pillow. Kaya reached over and took her hand. The girl squeezed back, hard, like she was holding onto the edge of a cliff. They stayed like that until the crying stopped, until exhaustion pulled them both down into sleep. Kaya dreamed of smoke, of her husband's hands braiding Hania's hair, of Takoda laughing at something she could not see. She woke before dawn, with the stone from her hem pressed against her ribs, hard and real, and the only thing she had left that still felt true. The days at the fort began to blur together. Wake at dawn, wash hands and face in cold water from a pitcher. Eat bread and weak tea in a room with long tables. Sit in a circle while Clara taught them to sew, to mend, to make patterns with thread on white cloth. The stitches were supposed to be small and even. Kaya's were crooked and too far apart. Clara corrected her gently over and over, until Kaya wanted to throw the needle across the room, but she did not throw it. She kept stitching. In the afternoons, they learned words. English words: table, chair, bread, water. Thank you. Yes. No. Please. Clara pointed at objects and said the words slowly. The women repeated them, their accents thick, their mouths struggling to make sounds that did not exist in their language. Kaya learned quickly. Too quickly. She did not want to learn quickly. She did not want to make it easy for them, but her mind absorbed the words anyway against her will, storing them like winter stores food for lean times. At night, she lay awake and planned her escape. The window was too small and the bars too strong. The door was locked from the outside. There were soldiers everywhere, watching, always watching. But she studied their patterns. She learned when they changed shifts. She learned which ones paid attention and which ones grew bored and lazy. She learned that Tuesday nights the soldier who stood outside their door was an older man who sometimes fell asleep standing up. It took 6 weeks before she was ready. 6 weeks of pretending to be grateful. 6 weeks of smiling at Clara. 6 weeks of stitching flowers onto white cloth and learning to say good morning and yes, ma'am, and thank you for your kindness. 6 weeks of dying a little more each day. The night she chose was cold, early autumn turning toward winter. She waited until the older soldier's breathing grew heavy and regular. She had stolen a knife from the kitchen 2 days earlier, hidden it in her mattress. She used it now to work the window frame loose, slowly, quietly, wood creaking softer than a whisper. It took an hour. When the frame finally gave, she eased the window open, squeezed through the gap, and dropped into the dirt below. The fall knocked the air from her lungs. She lay there for a moment, gasping, waiting for shouts, for gunfire, for the end. Nothing came, just wind, just darkness, just the smell of horses and hay and freedom. She ran, not toward the gates. Toward the back wall, where she had seen a drainage gap beneath the stones. She crawled through mud and ice water, feeling stones scrape her shoulders, feeling the cold seep into her bones. On the other side, she stood and ran again, toward the mountains, toward the north, toward the place where she had last seen her sons sleeping by the fire. She ran for 3 days, ate roots and berries, drank from streams, slept in hollow logs and beneath rock overhangs. Her feet bled through the thin shoes Clara had given her. The white dress tore and became brown with dirt and green with moss. She did not care. She was moving toward them, toward home, toward the only thing that mattered. On the 4th day, she found the valley where their village had been. She stood at the top of the ridge and looked down, heart hammering, breath coming fast, hope and terror fighting in her chest. The valley was empty, not destroyed, not burned, just empty. The teepee poles were gone. The fire circles were cold and scattered. The trees they had marked were unmarked. It was as if her people had never been there at all, as if the earth had swallowed them whole and left no trace. Kaya walked down into the valley slowly. She knelt where her family's shelter had stood. She put her hands flat against the ground and closed her eyes and tried to feel them, tried to sense which direction they had gone, tried to hear some echo of Takoda's laughter or Hania's quiet humming. But there was nothing, just wind, just grass, just the terrible, infinite silence of a place where people used to be. She sat there until the sun went down, until the cold made her shake, until she understood that she had no idea where they were. They could be anywhere. They could be 3 valleys over or 300 miles away. They could be at another fort. They could be dead. She would never know. She had nothing, no tracks, no signs, no way forward. The choice came slowly, like water filling a cup 1 drop at a time. She could stay here and starve. She could wander and maybe find them and probably die trying. Or she could go back to the fort, where there was food, where there was shelter, where there was a bed and a door that locked, and a woman named Clara, who at least pretended to see her as human. She stood up, brushed the dirt from her dress, turned around, and started walking back. It took her 5 days to return. She arrived at dawn exhausted, hollow, her feet wrapped in strips torn from her dress because the shoes had fallen apart 2 days earlier. She walked through the front gate. The guards stared but did not stop her. She walked past the stables, past the kitchens, past the rows of soldiers who watched her with expressions she could not read and did not care to understand. Clara was standing in the doorway of the main building. When she saw Kaya, her face did something complicated: relief, sadness, resignation. She did not say anything. She just opened the door wider and stepped aside. Kaya walked in. Clara led her back to the small room with the 4 beds. The other women were still there. They looked up when Kaya entered, their eyes asking questions she could not answer. She sat down on her bed. Clara brought her water, bread, a clean dress. Kaya took them. She drank. She ate. She changed. That night, she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The stone from Hania was still sewn into her hem. She could feel it pressing against her hip. Small, hard, real. Proof that she had been a mother once. Proof that somewhere maybe 2 boys still remembered her face. She did not cry. She had no tears left. She just lay there breathing, existing, waiting for a day that might never come when someone would arrive at the fort and say they had seen 2 boys, one with a scar above his eyebrow, one who collected stones. Waiting for a moment when she could run again, this time in the right direction. But until then, she would stay. She would eat their bread. She would learn their words. She would stitch their flowers onto white cloth. She would wash with their lavender soap and sleep in their narrow bed and wear their thin dress. Not because she wanted to, not because she had forgiven anything, but because staying alive was the only way to remain a mother, even to sons she could not find. The soap still smelled like flowers she had never seen, but now when she held it, her hands no longer shook. She had learned to steady herself. She had learned that survival sometimes looks like surrender, that waiting sometimes looks like giving up, that love sometimes means living in a place you hate because it is the only place where you can still be found. Clara never asked where she had gone, never asked why she came back. She just continued teaching, continued offering, continued existing in that careful space between kindness and control. And Kaya continued learning, continued accepting, continued holding onto a stone in her hem and a hope that grew smaller each day, but never quite disappeared. Some nights, she dreamed of Takoda's laughter. Some nights, she dreamed of Hania's small hands sorting stones by color. Some nights, she dreamed of her husband's voice singing the old songs, and some nights, she did not dream at all. She just lay there in the darkness, listening to the breathing of the other women, feeling the weight of the blanket, smelling the faint trace of lavender that never quite washed out of her hair. The seasons changed. Autumn became winter. Winter became spring. The fort remained. The women remained. And Kaya remained, somewhere between lost and found, between prisoner and guest, between the mother she had been and the shadow of herself she had become. She remained because remaining was all she had left, and because somewhere in a valley or a fort or a place she could not name, 2 boys might still be looking for a woman who smelled like sage and smoke. And if they ever found their way back, she needed to still be alive to recognize them. That was the truth the soap had taught her. That was the lesson of the warm water and the white dress and the locked door with no visible chains. You could lose everything and still keep breathing. You could wash away every mark that made you who you were and still carry your name inside your chest. You could surrender every battle and still refuse to lose the war. Kaya closed her eyes. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall. Inside, the room was warm, safe, empty of everything except survival. And for now, for this moment, for as long as it took, survival was enough. If stories like this one touch something deep inside you, if these quiet moments of resilience and heartbreak matter to you, Consider subscribing so that memories this delicate, this human, do not disappear into silence.